Okay, welcome everyone to the session on journey mapping and ePortfolio practice. We are so delighted that you are continuing to spend your day with us. If you're on the East Coast, it's maybe getting to be around dinner time. And so please make sure you're getting that regular caffeine in there. We are recording today's session. And so if you would not like to be recorded, you're welcome to turn off your camera and change your Zoom handle so that you can present anonymously. I also wanted to share that we have captioning happening for accessibility. And so if you'd like to access those captions, you can do so at the bottom of your Zoom screen where the tools are located. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to add them to the chat throughout the presentation, and we'll make sure that our presenters get that information so that they can respond to your questions and comments. And with that, I will pass it off to Rachel.
Thank you. I think it would be really interesting if we all could share in the chat the current time of where we are located. I think that would be really fun. I think we have some people here from Australia and some people East Coast, West Coast. I think that'd be really fun if you take a moment and put that in the chat. We have 2 p.m., 5 p.m., 4 p.m. Nice. Just fed the dogs dinner. Oh, that's a good reminder. 2 p.m. Nice. So it looks like currently a lot for chicken time. 9 a.m. Awesome. All right. Thank you for sharing that. So this session is going to be a follow-up to a session that I led in June for participants, teams that are in the current Institute on ePortfolios through the AAC&U. So I just wanted to share this screen before I turn it over to the 3 teams that are here to give you an overview of the Institute if you're not familiar with this. So this is a year-long endeavor where you work with a team from your institution and you're assigned a faculty mentor and you set an action plan and goals and implementation and then a follow-up. And ideally would have hopefully some type of SOTL attached to that at the end. But basically, it's a year-long endeavor to kind of either get started or overcome a current challenge that you are facing in your ePortfolio practice. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and tell you that we have 3 wonderful teams that are participating in the Institute with us. We have the University of Arkansas, Mississippi University for Women, and Colorado Mountain. So I'm going to turn it over to Lynn and Catherine, if she is here, to share their journey so far in the Institute and then future goals. So in the June session, I guided teams through the creation of a journey map, which is a visual illustration of a journey that a person or a team goes through over time. So this will be the journey of their experience in the Institute so far. So I will turn it over to Lynn and Catherine from University of Arkansas.
All right, excellent. Catherine, do you have yours ready to share? If not, I'm happy to.
I do not, if you have it.
I have it ready then, no worries. Can you see the University of Arkansas ePortfolio journey?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'd like to start with 1 or 2, and then I will trade it over to Catherine for number 3. But our campus has been discussing ePortfolios for a while, like many campuses. There's just pockets here and there. There was talk about starting programs, but they were never quite consolidated. The University of Arkansas did the HIPS Institute, and that reinvigorated the interest. We came back saying, hey, we really want to do something. And so started dabbling in small ways. And one of the small ways that we did that is I'm from the College of Arts and Sciences, and the student success team is housed closely within that. And so we started having an ePortfolio course. And so it was a 1-hour course. And oftentimes students would take that alongside of like an internship course or a career connections course. Catherine, I'll turn it to you.
Sure. So in fall 22, the Arts and Sciences College formed an exploratory committee, and they invited myself and a colleague of mine from IT services, so we're from Central IT, to kind of investigate different platforms and technologies in an attempt to have a solution So we investigated a lot of different platforms. We talked to other groups on campus who used ePortfolios. And we decided at the end of that to actually implement WordPress as our platform, in part because we already had it on campus. It was already used. We had the start of a support system, and it was relatively inexpensive for an additional instance. And so all of those together allowed for us to offer it as an enterprise solution for a tool, instead of having different colleges or different departments have their own tools. We decided to, kind of get together and offer that to the entire campus. And then that's also when we applied for the ePortfolio Institute and got accepted. And so, Lynn, do you want to talk about what we started to do?
Sure. We got together, and so it was a nice marriage of ideas in the fact that I'm working closely with student success, and I'm working very closely with career services. I also have a background in communication. We recruited Catherine, who I call our tech wizard, to the team. And we have folks from foreign languages who'd already been doing ePortfolios and some other career specialists. So it was a really nice building of ideas. And so what we decided to do was, with the WordPress, to actually build templates, sort of, I call them plug and play templates, so that students then could just take it and they wouldn't have to worry about the text so much, and we could focus more on the reflection and the writing. We could work more on how to build the career competencies and how to write to those sorts of things. The other thing we realized is we wanted to be able to have access to the tools. So I had written an OER textbook in communication, and so it was a nice fit for our campus to go ahead and to build the OER textbook. I put a link in the chat for everyone. And so we are actually building it with a focus on the professional career type portfolio. But there was enough interest on campus that since we started the book, we've actually added chapters on here's teaching portfolios, here's some program portfolios, so that it could be used by anyone on our campus. The goal was to have the platform ready, to have the resources ready, so that any teacher who wants to do it, a lot of the items are in place so that they could incorporate it that way. So Catherine, I'll turn it back to you.
Sure. So one of the things as we started to implement this was we wanted to make sure that we were considering accessibility. We were wanting to make sure we were considering the support for students and the support for faculty. And so, as I said, we kind of tapped into our existing teaching and learning support for level 1, 2, and 3. We are working with other groups, making sure that the technology solution isn't a barrier or a problem. We figured out what didn't work, and we, taking the advice that we learned in the Institute, we're going relatively slow. So, we started in January, February, getting things ready. March and April, we started to develop the platform, make sure that it was ready. We have now the different documentation, the videos, all of that is kind of ready and packaged, and we're doing training for our help desk and for our level 2 support to make sure that the pilot for the fall, and we're starting small, we're doing a small pilot in the fall, gathering feedback and getting things there to make sure that it's as successful as possible, so that if something does go wrong, we can correct it for maybe a couple hundred students as opposed to 30,000 students.
And thank you to Eddie, absolutely, for that. That was a big suggestion. He kept saying, start small, test it out, try it out. And I think that's going to be a program that works really well for us, for sure. The other things that we're doing is we're rolling it in to, since we did the HIPS Institute, our campus has an annual HIPS, it's like a conference. This year we're calling it a show and tell. And so it's going to be 3 hours, and it's going to be in a building where every room is dedicated to a different high impact practice, one of which is ePortfolio. And so it's going to be, we kind of say it's like a science fair on steroids, where people can go through and find out which one of the high impact practices, they can pick one, they can do all of them. In the ePortfolio room, we're going to be showing slides from all over campus. We're going to have access to the book. We're going to have examples of student work. We're going to have assignments that teachers can incorporate incorporate, and again, just kind of getting it in people's minds. This is something they might be able to do. These are some of the resources. And then our goal is, after we get all the information from this pilot and the resources, we want to just pause and say, what just happened? What works? What doesn't? What do we need to change? How can we add to this? How can we build new partnerships? Because our goal would be to take it first to the Fulbright College of Arts and Sciences as a platform, but then to be able to take it campus-wide. Catherine, do you have any other additions?
The other thing that we did was we made sure to gather information from other groups too, because we don't want it to be the case where, you know, we take it to the other colleges and they're like, why wasn't I consulted? And so we've been consulting with people that we know in other colleges use ePortfolio platform. So far, everybody's really excited, in part because there's that built-in support, and we're emphasizing that your students can call the help desk just like they do for any other academic technology. And so they get excited about that. There's that buy-in. We're also, because we're trying to make it as easy as possible for the instructors and students, they like that. And then we also tie it into the fact that, you know, we're using WordPress because in part it is 46%, I think, of all websites currently use WordPress. And so it is a skill that students can take with them that they can then talk about with their employers, that they have experience with WordPress. And, you know, that's going to be another valuable skill that we can add on top of. And so we want them to showcase what they learned at the university. And this is another thing that they learned. And so it's a way to kind of, instead of having a single use tool that's only used for portfolios at the university, we're teaching them a skill that they can then take on and use elsewhere. And so that was one of the things that I really liked about it.
And the other thing I think is us making strategic partnerships, because our team doesn't want to own this thing. We don't have a portfolio center. We don't have one group that owns this. We are creating the tools that anyone can use, making the connections with the writing center, the career courses, so that anyone can pick up on this work. Thank you so much for letting us share. I put the link to the textbook in there. You're welcome to share it, to use it. It is about 80% finished, but we are actually been working with and using the chapters as we build them. I also, if anyone wants to give me input and say, you need more of this, less of this. Oh, by the way, there's a typo. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lynn and Catherine. Any reactions, thoughts, comments, questions? There's a few in the chat. This is amazing. Strategic process, great stuff. This is awesome work. Love it. Thank you.
I love that your journey starts with the AAC&U High Impact Practice Institute, because that is where our journey started as well.
That's awesome. Abby, do you want to go next and share?
I can if it makes sense, but I love that nodal point, because that was precisely where ours started too. So
yeah, I think you should be able to share screen. Yeah. And then Lynn, if you're able to share that link one more time to the text, that would be great.
Can y'all see that?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, hi, everyone. I'm Abby Crew, Assistant Dean of Academic Planning, Assessment Improvement, Curriculum Review, and Innovation at Colorado Mountain College, and it took me 1.5 years to remember my title. So here we are. We also started our journey, you'll see, in June of 2022 at the AAC&U High Impact Practice Institute, where we came in guns blazing, ready to tackle first-year experience, and quickly pivoted to ePortfolio, which is the right call for our institution. We have 11 campuses. We're over 34,000 square miles on the Western Slope. We partner with 33 area high schools. We have certificate, associate, and a bachelor's program. So this one-size-fits-all first-year experience doesn't fit any at our institution. So instead, an ePortfolio is far more versatile for our 1-semester certificates all the way up to our bachelor's program. So that's really exciting. And we're grateful for that shift in focus coming out of the High Impact Practice Institute with AAC&U. So in August, we were able to obtain funds to pilot with Digication. And we also did an internal inventory of our e-portfolios across the institution. We had some four-year programs that were already using e-portfolios more as a job solicitation, like a LinkedIn profile was part of a capstone course in one of our four-year programs. Our digital photography had always done portfolios. So just kind of getting a landscape, getting a kind of pulse on the landscape of what was happening throughout the institution and what the platforms, the other platforms were that folks were using throughout the departments. So what a pivotal moment for us, and I shared this in a chat earlier with Change, is that we had new institutional student learning outcomes approved in January of 2023. And you can see those at the top, their knowledge, involvement, and application. And so there's three high-level institutional student learning outcomes that scaffold to the AAC&U value rubrics. So that helps us, we think, we're getting there, that's all the way at the end, that helps us assess our institutional student learning outcome. In theory, we haven't gotten there yet, but at least it gave us a framework to wrap our arms around what we believe and what we want to deliver as an institution for all of our students' experience. So we took these ISLOs, as we're calling them, on the road. They're the same as the essential learning outcomes. We just use ISLOs because we like more alphabet soup in higher ed, just to confuse everyone. So we took the concept of these ISLOs on the road in February to our 11 different campuses, and there was so much enthusiasm for capturing these ISLOs within ePortfolio. Folks just thought this was awesome and wanted to get their hands on ePortfolio. So that was just really cool, actually. We didn't expect that. So then in March, we created a template in Digication with these new institutional student learning outcomes. We were able to celebrate and showcase the ePortfolios in our inaugural student symposium in April. So we were celebrating that first iteration of the pilot with Digication with some students. It was smaller than expected, but you got to start somewhere. So here we are. I'll be transparent in that. Can only go up from 11, I think. So here we are. So then in May, we had a professional development session on ePortfolio, and I ran that, and I got a computer lab, and we ran out of computers, which was awesome. And folks had their own laptops, and there were about 50 people in that session. So that was like a quarter of our PD folks were there, really hungry and curious about Digication and the tool and what we can do with it. What we want to conceptualize here is, because we're moving from a first-year experience to an ePortfolio, is rolling out ePortfolio in our holistic advising model. And so we're at the infancy of creating that model, but we really think this could be a robust tool for our advisors and our students to take with them across the totality of their experience at CMC. So it isn't based in a course necessarily, but it's a touch point with an advisor at each registration period, which is pretty exciting. It hasn't happened yet. We're still in the ideation, tiptoeing into implementation. So I'll report back on the findings there. I also was invited into the business school to give a presentation, and like every single one of those instructors wants Digication added to their course in the fall, which is great. So they were excited about it. Sometimes business school is a hard sell, and they were overwhelmingly enthusiastic about Digication and the power of ePortfolio. So this other kind of interesting addition to our timeline, which I hadn't had on there, and then my colleague said, you need to add that. And I said, okay, well, we were approached by the state to collaborate with this Credential As You Go initiative because of what we're doing with our institutional student learning outcomes and how we're capturing them in the ePortfolio. And we talked a little bit this morning, folks were talking about the transferable skills. And so we're calling them essential skills, and we're embedding them in an IT certificate. So it sounds like other folks are doing this. It's not that unique. Colorado is pretty excited to showcase how we're doing it at Colorado Mountain College. So I added that because, we were voluntold to do that. Presenting at the ABLE conference definitely made the list. It's a notable point here. So where we're looking to go in the future is to scale up the pilot for year 2 using this Cora build of Digication to embed it in advising. It'll roll out more robustly in the business school. schedule. We also have an internship coordinator coming on board who will hopefully be able to align, I love the presentation earlier, the two hips of internships captured through ePortfolio. I just think it makes so much sense there. And finally, looking at the assessment side, that's what we're really excited about, Cora, is the assessment side and overlaying those AAC&U value rubrics to our institutional student learning outcome. And we have the SLAC committee is the Student Learning Assessment Committee, and they're excited to get their hands on this and learn it too. So I would say on all of these nodal points, some of it is still ideation. We don't have a ton of evidence, but we have rosy glasses still. So don't dispel that for me yet.
Abby, this is great info. I really appreciate your journey, especially hearing the faculty buy-in. I feel like that is often a obstacle for teams to do ePortfolio. I think that's awesome. ePortfolio, does that mean students are no longer taking an FYE? They're taking an ePortfolio class?
So I just stopped sharing because you were glitching out because I think my bandwidth was getting
sorry.
weird. No, that's okay. So we never had a first year experience class, so it didn't go away. And so we don't have a class per se, but what we're hoping is that we can roll out, well, every student has a Digication account. And if part of our onboarding can introduce them to their Digication account, then they can get a communication that says, introduce yourself to your advisor by making this ePortfolio your own prior to your first meeting, and then leaving your first meeting, outline where you want to go and what you want to do with your academic journey into your professional career, right? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
I'm so grateful that you had us run through this exercise. So I was like, I don't know, we didn't really do anything. So I was like, oh my God, this is awesome.
Actually write it down.
It was really powerful exercise, and I'm grateful. And I'm going to present this at our academic council meeting on Thursday. I was just like, oh, you got scheduled. And I was like, I had something for that. Fantastic. Thank you.
Oh, that's fabulous. Love to hear that. Yeah. Any questions, comments for Abby? I see one in the comment. We have fabulous. Awesome. Well, let's move on to Mississippi University for Women with Russell.
Hi there. My name's Russell Brandon. I'm the director for the Kaufman Center for Teaching and Learning at Mississippi University for Women. We're a small liberal arts institution in Columbus, Mississippi, home birthplace of Tennessee Williams. For a fun fact there, yes, it is Columbus, Mississippi, not Columbus, Ohio. But I will go ahead and share my screen here. And so what we did a lot for our infographic is we focused a bit on a lot of the big sort of considerations that we took in thinking about how we would start to approach the AAC&U Institute. And one of the most impactful things that we already knew beforehand was that portfolios exist in some form or fashion in most disciplines at our university, whether they be capstones, portfolios of work, achievements, performances, observations, lessons, portfolios, internships, or clinicals. There's a huge diversity of these opportunities for students to engage with kind of their career trajectory and the things that they've learned throughout their experience as a student. And so, and we also had to take that into account pretty heavily, mainly because a lot of the examples that we've already heard here at sessions here, as well as several that we heard across the AAC&U Institute, were basically that idea of autonomy within departments. So affording faculty the ability to be able to really, to give them the ability to make substantial decisions about how they want to implement these sorts of things. And so that's how we kind of started in the fall, thinking about the Institute, and then moving into the Institute. We had the wonderful help from Pablo at the ACNU, our wonderful mentor, who again, just reiterating that start small component. And so we started up focusing on conversations with faculty, really highlighting those departments that already had really well established and pretty obvious e-portfolio usage, those being our departments of nursing, education, and music. So beyond just kind of having those general conversations about different assessments that include those different sort of applicable experiences, we also started to have more conversations with faculty about the challenges for creating assignments. Again, kind of really keeping in mind and that go slow mantra of not creating that much more work for faculty. That was one of our big focuses in several of our workshops. We had a specific April workshop that was led by our nursing and education and music departments. They basically gave examples, and this was a great opportunity for faculty to communicate across departments, which thematically that's kind of become our primary focus for a lot of the decisions that we're making earlier on before we start to really go into the heavier work of implementing pilots, is to really create those lines of communications, not just between academic departments, but also those departments that can support the implementation of e-portfolios. We also already have a fall development session scheduled that we're going to be having after our convocation that's going to focus on e-portfolios and kind of just reiterate that information, bring it back up that we have a committee of wonderful and supportive people who are here to make e-portfolios a reality, or at least make them useful for faculty, whatever discipline they're in. So interestingly enough, a lot of the conversations that we had after sort of starting this journey map, as well as during our institute kind of reviewing what our sort of bigger picture is, as well as our smaller picture moving into spring of 2020 or fall of 2023 and spring of 2024. For one, really focusing on the ability to, or focusing on opportunities for us to engage with students in really illustrating the value of an e-portfolio beyond just sort of the assignment component. We've started having conversations again. We're currently in the process of asking some questions about our signature pathway, basically that kind of first year experience sort of course that we have. We've also started talking about how we can bring in more community engagement and professional development. We just had an educational, our outreach and education department in our College of Education has just rebranded as an educational outreach arm of that. So really focusing on placement for new teachers and things like that. So really finding things that are already being done at the university that engage with the community, and finding ways that we can help to adapt those to make it easier for other colleges and departments to do that. Really having good conversations with student affairs to find those students that might be more particularly interested, considering things like peer mentorship to really reinforce that idea of the e-portfolio as something that's you can take with you throughout your experience as a student. Functionally, we have gotten, we use Canvas as our LMS at the W, and are looking at or have already instituted Badger, and we are currently working on folding that into the Toolfolio to be able to provide a sort of baseline tool for faculty, departments, or colleges that want to adopt e-portfolios but might not want to take on the onerous work of having to set up the full system. We also have a new portfolio system that our College of Education has adopted and is starting in the fall, called Watermark. They're using that primarily for licensure, but again, that's given us the opportunity to have more conversations with education as far as the things that they're trying to accomplish. And we also are in the process of reinvigorating our career services department. So really looking at how we can leverage all of the things that we already have to be able to more effectively implement e-portfolios, or to be honest, to better support the e-portfolios that already exist on campus, and kind of, again, bridge those gaps between colleges and departments, as well as help students to bridge those gaps between the different things that they learn in their different coursework. And shout out to my team, Dr. Brian Anderson, Dr. Ceci Brooks, Dr. Sheila Morgan, and Dr. Richard Morgan. A couple of my colleagues in the chat right now, but it's been a journey so far.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Russell. We do have a question for you. It says, I'd be interested to hear more about how you are folding badges into the e-portfolio process. Are they tied to classes, experiences, or something else?
So far, most of the conversations that we've had have been kind of those baseline skill attachments. So right now we're working with our communications department to develop some just kind of basic badge icons that then we can use in that case. But our primary goal for that is to coordinate with faculty to really find those important skills as far as the coursework is concerned. In my case, as KCTL director, we have an online teaching academy. And so what we're working on right now is implementing a small amount of badges that will allow us to kind of test those things out, allow faculty adjuncts to be the students receiving badges for different things. But primarily what we're using the badging for is as an engagement tool, just to kind of get people thinking more about how to parse out those individual skills or those competencies that might be meaningful outside of a course. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, great. Thanks for answering. I have a question for all of the panelists that shared their journey. And Abby talked a little bit about this. Can you just share a little bit about your experience as a team creating your journey map for your institute experience thus far?
I can talk about our very sad team over the summer. You may have guessed I am the sole representative of CMC, but I do collaborate with one of my colleagues offline because she's wearing 3 different hats right now. So I understand that a lot of the work does happen over the summer, and also that's tricky for 2 of our faculty who are on the team and folks who have other projects going on. So my shoulders are getting a little tired.
I can imagine. Lynn, Russell, Catherine.
As a function of the journey map, if you don't mind me sharing my screen again, I have
yeah, please do.
It prompted me to think a lot more about sort of all the different components. And so that first page, which is kind of our what we worked on together, but we have a massive number of just kind of notes as far as thinking about how we can pull all of these different things together. And the journey map has become kind of a good sort of like anchor point for a lot of these questions. And I mean, props to AAC&U as far as that, the facilitation of an action plan. This feels like a really natural extension to that. So again, the idea that you can set up that action plan and then you can see that action that you had planned on doing become something that you've already accomplished, a checkpoint in your journey. So
this is great. I love that. And to me, it seems that the journey map really complements and parallels an e-portfolio as an artifact for you reflecting on your experience working with e-portfolios. Lynn, Catherine, any thoughts?
Well, I think that I can agree. Absolutely. We do have the challenges of summer. because Catherine and I are around and we have a team of others who aren't for different reasons. Some are teaching abroad, some are on 9-month contracts. So that's been an interesting part of our journey for sure. So I guess there's just like the pilot and co-pilot in our little car that we showed earlier. It's fuller on other parts of the trip. But I do think that like when we were thinking about metaphors, and we spent way too much time trying to pick the right graphic, simply because I'm a visual and Catherine's really good with technology. But I think the idea was the fact that it is very much a road trip, right? Where we have a destination, the destination's never the final destination, right? If you go on a trip, there's always like one more place to go, and there's always like one more stop. And I think that that was a really good visual for us to be thinking about, like how there just stops along the way, and how to make the most of the stop, process the stop, think about the stop, do what we need, but also to be prepared to find the next spot on the map.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of looking at it like the road trip journey. I love that analogy. And whether it's a stop or a detour, no matter what it is, it's always going to be, different from what you expected. So I would love now to turn it over to the audience for questions or comments, or how you think you might use something like a journey map in your own ePortfolio practice. Feel free to use the chat. What is your top tip for getting started with journey mapping? Great question. So I and my team are facilitating a workshop tomorrow where we will share our experience with journey maps. We actually use a journey map assignment in class. It's a 2-class period assignment prior to even talking about ePortfolios. And then we will guide you through a personal ePortfolio. So you can either choose to do that based on your ePortfolio work, or I'm mostly going to be guiding it as a professional ePortfolio. So you'll be thinking back to your earliest memory that you have that has something to do with who you are as a professional today. So kind of like this meta reflection of your entire life. So for me, I think my first memory that I can tie back to would have been in 5th grade at a camp that I had to go to. So really kind of reflecting on that, and it will be more guided towards something that you might use to help you in creating maybe a dossier for promotion or something like that. So telling your story of your journey. Yeah. See, we got a few more coming in. Awesome. And then Pat says, I wish I had created a journey map for using ePortfolio in my classes. Maybe I can use one as I try to convince others in my department to transition to ePortfolios. Absolutely. Yeah. Faculty buy-in is still my biggest obstacle with that. That sounds great. Nothing to it, but do it. Yeah. Yeah. Other questions, comments, feedback?
Thank you to Rachel and to all of our wonderful participants for sharing their experiences. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. You're welcome to just have conversation with one another while we anticipate our next session.